Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. Well, the New York Yankees finally get their first taste of interleague action, get a visit from the Chicago Cubs in a rematch of the 1932 World Series. Not as dramatic as the 32 series, because as we had the call shot at Babe Ruth, but a ton of home runs by the Yankees, including, again, the newcomer Matt Carpenter. Get into all that. Look a little bit back on the Minnesota series. They had a little mini road trip there after the 6-game double sweep of the Angels and the Detroit Tigers. Just recap that a little bit and kind of mention a few things about the starting pitching because they got a little roughed up there. And, of course, we'll get into the Cubs series and, again, talk about the emergence of that Matt Carpenter, who's just been just hitting home runs like crazy since becoming a Yankee. Looks like a genius move by Cashman. But would that mean his emergence mean the end of Marwin Gonzalez? So we'll look at that. Some Yankees are going to come back. Some roster spots are going to get tightened up there. Look at all that. But before we do, if you haven't done it already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Section 420 Talkin Yankees. So even though you're seeing me now, you can get more updates and quicker updates, more frequent updates throughout the week by going to wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Go to Section 420 Talkin Yankees, hit the search bar. Boom, I'll come up that way. You'll see the logo. Click that, subscribe, and again, get more of these updates, more of these little stories and little chats throughout the week, so you don't have to wait a whole week or a whole 2 weeks in order to see me again. So, subscribe. So the Yankees fueled up the plane, took a little trip to Minnesota where they have that big turkey leg drumstick that you eat off, that mutton. 3-game set against the Minnesota Twins. Now, of course, before the season started, the Yankees made the big 5-player trade, sending Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela over there. The Yankees ended up getting Donaldson, IKF, who was in a Twins uniform for a cup of coffee, as well as Ben Rovette, who currently the Yankees are trying to rehab, get him back possibly up to the major league level at some point. So that was kind of the big story before the season started. Kind of weighed out who really got the better of that deal. Kind of break that down a little bit after this. But for the Yankees, making a little trip to Minnesota. And of course, Minnesota also made a little big splash at the beginning of the season, signing Carlos Correa to a 3-year deal. Now, of course, he can opt out after the first year, which most people think he's going to do. But it's been injured for a while, so was not there available for the first game of the series, but was there for the second and third, and actually made quite an impact. At least in the third game. We'll get into all that. But with the Yankees on the mound was Jameson Taillon. Now, on the homestand before that, the Yankees had probably some of the best starting pitching of the season, of course, since 1978, and going 5 games where the starters gave up a 1 run or less. The only Yankee started to kind of derail that was Jordan Montgomery in the final game against Detroit. Actually gave up 2 runs. How dare he? How terrible of him to give up 2 runs. So we kind of snapped that streak. So Yankees started pitching was top form, but could have been a situation that since some of the starters were again going long, going 7 to 8 innings. A couple of situations I recall with Taillon and Garrett Cole flirting with perfect games there late in the game. A lot of inning pitch, a lot of impression there. Might have played a little bit into this Twins series where the Yankees starting pitching really for the first time the entire season wasn't good at all. I mean, really all 3 starts were lousy. You look at some of the previous series, even some of them, they lost maybe early in the season. You figure maybe one of the 3 starters would be bad, or maybe 2 out of the 4. But this is a situation where all 3 Yankee starters didn't really have it. Now, start off with Taillon. Now, the Yankees got him a lead early on by thanks to Aaron Judge hitting a 2-run home run. In the first inning, that was followed up by a Stantonian home run, his first back since being on the injured reserve list for a while. So gave Taillon a 3-0 lead to work with. But Minnesota did chip back, and Taillon just really didn't have it much. Got to the point where Yankees only were squeaking ahead with a 5-3 lead. And then for Taillon, I guess his dagger was in the 5th inning when Jorge Polanco hit a home run to again bring the score to 5-4. And at that point, Boone had to yank Taillon and had to go to the bullpen for the rest of the way. So that was probably like the first lousy Yankee start in almost 2+ weeks. But fortunately for the Yankees, the bats did come alive, and really the big inning there was the 7th inning. So with 2 outs, DJ LeMahieu was up. Ended up getting a hit. Now he went to second base on a wild pitch, but still with 2 outs and an open bag at first. And of course, the red-hot Aaron Judge, who already hit a home run in the first inning, and again passed the hottest hitter in baseball at the time. They figured let's not let this guy beat us with a running scoring position. So decided to walk Judge to face Anthony Rizzo with 2 on, and Rizzo made him pay a big 3-run home run, which then gave the Yankees a 8-4 cushion. And the Yankees weren't done there. Tacked on a few more runs later on, built up a 10-4 lead, and that would be your final score. So again, the Yankee offense kind of picked up Taillon, who flirted with a perfect game his previous start. This time, I guess the offense needed to pick him up a little bit. So the Yankees took that first game. And then now this brings us to game 2, where this is probably the most unique game, maybe, I don't know, in a good way and a bad way for the Yankees this whole season, because it was a situation where they got lousy starting pitching and no offense. Usually it's one or the other. Usually your starter, throws a good game, but the offense has to back him up, and you lose the game like 2-1, 4-2. It's like, all right, whatever. Or you just have one of those like this demolition derby back and forth games where like the offense is just crushing home runs against each other, kind of like the Yankees and Red Sox in the early 2000s, and your final score is like 12-10 or 8-10 like that. This is a situation where both the Yankees starter Nestor Cortes wasn't good, and then the offense gave you absolutely nothing. Cortes himself needed to be yanked into the 5th inning, gave up 4 runs, and they brought in Clark Schmidt. He wasn't useful as all. Also gave up 4 runs. I guess the only bright spot for the Yankees this game, well, actually there were 2, was Aaron Hicks throwing out our old friend Gio Urshela, trying to score from home. So just good to see Hicks show off the gun there a little bit. And of course, the feel-good story was Manny Banuelos. As you may remember, was in the Yankee farm system for a great number of years. They signed him from the Mexican League back in like 2008. And he was supposed to be part of the trio of him and Dellin Betances and Andrew Brackman were kind of going to be like the big trio, kind of like the Mets had in the early 90s with like Bill Pulsipher and Todd Harrington. I forgot the guy. But those like 3 of them were supposed to be like the big new wave. Those were kind of supposed to be the big new wave for the Yankees. Unfortunately, Banuelos, this never worked out for him. He was in the Yankee minor league for a while. Just had a number of injuries, and then by 2015 ended up just trading him away. Kind of bounced around a little bit, was with the Braves organization, and before this season even started, the Yankees picked him up to a minor league deal. He eventually, just through players being injured, such as Chapman and so forth, and Loaizaga, gave him an opportunity, so they brought him up to the Major League Cubs. So finally, after 14 years, his first opportunity to pitch for the Major League level of the New York Yankees. So he got there on the field, threw 2 shutout innings, so good for him. And he actually wore number 68, where, if you may recall, when Dellin Betances was here as a Yankee, and again, one of the best setup men in the game, one of the best 8th inning men in the game, he wore number 68. So I guess Banuelos did that to sort of homage to Dellin Betances. And it's just good to see that story. So again, the Yankees lost the game. Bad start by Nestor. The offense gave you nothing. But again, we'll see Hicks throw someone out. That's a good sign of life. Just get anything decent, anything positive from Hicks is a good thing. And of course, just to see Manny get that moment that he's been waiting for a very long time. So then this brought us to the finale of the 3rd game. And you have Garrett Cole on the mound, and again, was brilliant in his previous start. He threw a complete game, 3-0 against the Detroit Tigers. Again, flirted with a perfect game himself there for a while. But this game, totally didn't have it. Probably, I would say maybe his second worst start of his career. Could have been his first. The first one was probably early in the season, when you remember when he was at Detroit, where they had to yank him out of the 2nd inning because he walked the bases loaded, walked in a run, and absolutely had enough, and they had to yank him. He claimed that was probably his worst start. Well, this might have been worse. Ended up giving 5 home runs total, including 3 home runs in the 1st inning. So the Yankees gave him an early 1-0 lead thanks to a sac fly from Josh Donaldson. But in the bottom of the 1st inning, gave up not 1, not 2, not 3 home runs. One of them being to Carlos Correa, who did return in Game 2. Didn't do anything big in Game 2, but definitely made his impact in Game 3, hitting a home run, and also a home run by Brian Buxton, who would hit a second home run an inning later, and again, causing Cole ultimately to be yanked and put the Yankees in a big 7-3 hole. The only reason the Yankees are able to tack on 2 more was a home run by Joey Gallo. His first of the game, would have another one a little later on, but the Yankees were in a big deficit. But the good news is that the Yankees did fight back, did crawl back, made into a back-to-back home runs from DJ LeMahieu, as well as Joey Gallo, his second of the game. And for LeMahieu, it was his 100th home run of his career. Pulled the score within 5-7, but really a big moment came in the 6th inning. So, as mentioned, Correa was out for a while. So him and Jorge Polanco. Polanco was the second baseman. Correa is the shortstop. There's a pop-up by Gleyber Torres. Infield pop-up. Should have been routine. But seemed maybe a little miscommunication between Polanco and Correa. I guess they, hey, you go for it. I'm going for it. We didn't know. Ball drops right in front of him. So Torres is safe at first. Really, and it could be a situation just because with Correa maybe out for a while. Just a little miscommunication. Just, whatever. Possibly it could be one of the reasons, likely is. But anyway, that put a runner on for Aaron Hicks. And then Hicks, who again has been having a terrible season, fans have been getting on him, everyone's been ragging on him, hits a 2-run home run, and probably his biggest home run in, I would say, in 3 seasons. Not because at that point, yes, it did tie the game, and it was a big moment, in that in itself. But for Hicks, Obviously all last year was a washout, so he didn't play at all. 2020, a shortened season, didn't have any like super great moments. Really, his last big moment, you would say, was in the 2019 American League Championship Series against Houston, where I believe it was Game 5, so the Yankees were down 3-1. The fifth game was at Yankee Stadium. There was a situation where the Yankees, probably figured they're going to fizzle out. But in the bottom of the first inning, hits a big 3-run home run against Justin Verlander. Gives the Yankees a 3-0 lead there. Now, that's the game the Yankees eventually win, take the series back to Houston. And, of course, that Game 6 in Houston, as you may remember, that's the one where Altuve hit the game-winning home run against Chapman. And, of course, we know the buzzer and the thing, all that stuff. So, kind of that was Hicks' probably the last big moment, and that was back 2019. So this is like home run was only like 3 years in the making, and it was just good for Hicks just to hit that big home run in a big spot. And again, the previous night he threw out Urshela at home, so good. Seeing a little life from him. You're not back yet. We're totally convinced, but at least to see little things like that for Hicks, and again, hopefully whatever issues he's going through, maybe he's turning the corner a little bit, maybe. But at hand there, the Yankees at this game tied the game 7-7. In the seventh inning, Yankees would go ahead, thanks for opposite field RBI single by Anthony Rizzo, and then Hicks again also with an RBI single, scored another, gave the Yankees at that point an 9-7 lead. They would ultimately take a 10-7 lead, and that would be a final score with Clay Holmes coming out there to clean up the ninth inning, getting saved, and striking out the infamous now Carlos Correa to end the game. And for the Yankees, take the series. And, 2 out of 3 in Minnesota. Just a little concerned about, at that point, the starting pitchers, because all Taillon, Cortez, and Cole weren't good at all. And again, it's not a situation where you would worry about them too much, but it could have been, again, if you look at the stretch of games before, especially the 6 games at home, all those starters went pretty deep into the games, 7-8 innings. So it could maybe a little lingering effect of that, possibly why you didn't do too well. And, the former Yankees I mentioned before, Gary Sanchez, Gio Urshela, didn't really play a big factor in here. Against Cole that Gary Sanchez would have loved nothing more than hit like a 600-foot home run because, Cole's part of the reason probably Gary got shipped out. When your ace doesn't want to throw to you, that's bad news for you. So, but they really weren't much of a factor in this. And Gary and Gio have kind of picked it up a little bit. So early in the season, it didn't seem they were doing too well, at least at that point of that series. At least Sanchez hitting over 200, which for him is like a miracle, but 7 home runs, 27 RBIs. Gio, not too bad himself at the time, was 278 with 5 home runs, 23 RBIs. So not too bad, picked it up a little bit because they really didn't get off to the best of starts. And again, for the Yankees, taking 2 out of 3 in Minnesota. And, starters weren't that great, but again, that was like the first time the entire season so far, 2022, where the starters weren't good. And now the Yankees would go home to face those Chicago Cubs. So the Chicago Cubs visited Yankee Stadium. It was, again, for the Yankees, it was their first little taste of in-league action for the 2022 season. Now the Cubs came in 10 games under 500, so, you would still feel the Yankees had the clear advantage here. It's not like, facing the Dodgers, something like that. But nevertheless, it is the Cubs. And Cubs-Yankees, 2 big organizations, and their fan base, very similar to the Yankees, they kind of travel well. Probably wouldn't travel too well just because, 10 games under 500. But Cubs, usually represent themselves. I'm sure if the Cubs had a better record, there'd been a lot more blue shirts in the stands, but it really wasn't the case. And for the Yankees, coming home, getting a little home cooking, there's sort of a bit of a homestand there. And they had an old friend visit, Clint Frazier, who you may recall the Yankees designated for assignment at the end of last season. He's going to sign a 1-year deal with the Cubs, but kind of been hurt with them. Was out for a little bit for the appendectomy for a while, but since coming back, was hitting a little bit better for them, but overall, miserable season, a little over 200 batting average, no home runs. And before the game even started, he actually traveled with the team, was at Yankee Stadium. They ended up designating for assignment right on the spot before the game. So he was probably licking his chops a little bit, looking to get into the game. And then unfortunately, the Cubs pulled the rug from under him. Had a few players coming back from the injured reserve list, and I guess they had to make some roster moves. So, kind of messed up the way they did it. I got into it a little bit more. If you did subscribe to the podcast, you would have got that rant, so you can go back to it. Go to the podcast. I call it Clint Frazier, the unluckiest man in baseball. I kind of break that whole situation down, so not going to beat that to the death. But back to the issue at hand, Cubs at Yankees. Now, first game, Luis Severino on the mound. Again, the Yankees' 3 previous starts in Minnesota were not that good. Severi kind of turned the boat there, put in a strong performance for himself. The Yankees gave him an early 1-0 lead. Thanks to a home run from Gleyber Torres in the 4th inning. Unfortunately, Severino just had his one little blemish in the 5th inning, giving a solo home run to Jason Hayward, which tied the game 1-1. and it would be 1-1 for quite the way. Now, on the mound for the Cubs was Wade Miley. He needed to be yanked after 3 innings. And then after the game, they ended up putting him on the injured reserve list with a shoulder injury. So I guess his maybe shoulder was a little wonky. So really it was the battle of the bullpens after that. But overall, Severino, strong performance. 6 innings, only that 1 home run to Jason Haywood with 10 strikeouts. And it was the Yankee bullpen the rest of the way. And really the star of the game, I would say, would be the Yankee bullpen. I know Trevino at the 13th inning would end up getting the game-winning hit. I'll kind of get you that situation. But it was really the Yankee bullpen getting them to that situation. Clark Schmidt, Wandy Peralta, Ron Marinaccio. And not only just, throwing shutout innings there, but, as you know, in the 10th inning or more, you have the ghost runner on second base. And through hook or crook, a lot of times like Peralta would have a runner on third, Marinaccio would have a runner on third, and they would get out of the jam against kind of a high-pressure situation. Really left it to the 13th inning and kind of tell you very, very telling about the situation. So now Gallo was the ghost runner at the time at second base. Torres with a long fly ball, able to at least get him to third base. They ended up walking Hicks to set up the double play for Higgy, who was catching that night. Now, Boone had a choice here. He could have stuck with Higgy. I mean, you do have Trevino on the bench, but again, it's like sometimes you don't want to use your second catcher because what happens if he gets hurt? Now you're out of catchers. I know you always have a situation where maybe like Marwin Gonzalez can maybe throw the pads in there, but you just never want to get to that situation. But Boone makes a gutsy call, and for Trevino, I mean, he's been part of some big Yankee rallies in the 9th inning. He got that game-winning hit against the Baltimore Orioles, so and he has been hitting better, a couple of home runs, so he's been rising to the moment. And Higgy, you just look at the season, very miserable for him, hitting about $150, no home runs. And you get to see, we'll get into this a little after, just the writing on the wall with him, not hitting at all. And you see more and more as we're going along, Trevino getting more of the playing time. And in this situation, with Gallo at third, Boone wanted to go for the win there, so decides to go with Jose Trevino, and he delivers game-winning hit, kind of over the shortstop glove. Gallo's able to score easily, and again, it took 13 innings, but the Yankees come away with the 2-1 win. And, good moment for Trevino, but again, this kind of shows the faith kind of Boone has in Higgy, especially in a big spot like that. And again, maybe once Ben Rovette comes back healthy, that might spell the end of Higgy, but he would have a little noise in Game 3, so we'll get to Higgy in a moment. Brings us to Game 2, much more of an easier game for the New York Yankees. Now on the mound was Jordan Montgomery, who, traditionally, at least this season, especially this season, the Yankees don't score any runs for him. Only only one win on his record so far, but the Yankees finally came through for him yet again. Gave him some offense, gave him a big lead, and he repaid the Yankee roster plays position plays as well, going 7 strong innings of shutout baseball. And for the Yankees, really, you probably could have turned this off in the first or at least the 4th inning, but Judge got the Yankees on the board early in the 1st inning with a home run, but really the later on in the 4th inning, Stanton hitting a laser shot home run to just like went into like left field in the blink of an eye. Overall, the Yankees hit 6 home runs in this game, including Trevino, and another one later on by Aaron Judge. And then Judge later on will actually have a sacrifice fly. So good game from Judge. 2 home runs for him. Again, 6 home runs overall for the Yankee offense. And again, Jordan Montgomery and others closed out the game, gave the Yankees an easy 8-0 win for the second game, which brought us to the third game, which is probably the craziest one, because it pretty much ended up in a football score. And again, this game was pretty much over in the 1st inning. Now, Taillon in his previous start in Minnesota wasn't that good. Was only able to go 4 innings, had to get yanked in the 5th after giving up a home run. This start, a little bit better, but not that much better. Now, he did fall behind early in the 1st inning, thanks to a home run from Ian Happ. Put the Cubs ahead 1-0, but then the Yankee offense got to work right away in the bottom of the 5th inning. And again, situation like you could probably just turn it off there. Matt Carpenter, who would have a big game this game, walked the first Yankee runner in with bases loaded. That brought in the first run, and then you got a double from Kiner Falefa, brought in 2 more plays, and then Joey Gallo, again hitting a little bit better lately. Again, he had those 2 home runs in the 3rd win in Minnesota. Hits a big double off the walls, played some more, gave the Yankees a 5-1 lead. And from there, it was just a laugher on the rest of the way. Matt Carpenter, who I mentioned before, ended up hitting 2 home runs, would have 7 RBIs total. And this is how you know that the Cubs pitching is terrible. Even Higgy got a home run. And not only did he get 1 home run, up 17-4 in the 8th inning, it got so bad for the Cubs, they pretty much emptied out the bullpen from the previous 2 games. They had to go to Frank Schwindel, their first baseman, to just throw some knuckleballs up there, because they had nobody left in the bullpen. And gets clocked at the slowest pitch in Major League history at 35 miles per hour. Threw it into Higgy, and Higgy launched it over the left field wall, his second home run of the game. So Higgy hitting his first 2 home runs of the season in the same game. That just show you how bad the Cubs pitching is. And again, the Yankees walked away with a laugher, 18-4 win. It's it's more like a football score than a baseball score. And if you look at all 3 games combined, the Yankees absolutely blew them out, 28-5. So an absolutely dominating performance for the Yankees over the Cubs. Yes, the first game was close, so that was the close one. But from that point over, complete Yankee dominance. This from Aaron Judge, others, Carpenter, and all that. So the Yankees, unfortunately, for the Cub fans that made the trip, unfortunately for those fans, a lousy trip to New York, a lousy 3 days, and they probably couldn't wait to get on a plane at LaGuardia, JFK fast enough just to get the heck out of town. And really, when we look at this game, Matt Carpenter, in the limited amount of time he had to play for the Yankees, we'll get into this a little bit in a moment. But again, 6 home runs so far, and just only about 10 games. Again, a record breaker for a Yankee player. Again, getting 6 home runs in his first 10 games. So look at all the great players the Yankees had over the years. Matt Carpenter is the first one to do that, as well as tying a record tied with Trevor Story, getting 6 home runs out of his 7 hits, 6 of them being home runs. So, Carpenter's doing some crazy stuff here at age 36, and played some third base as well for the Yankees. So, being a little athletic as well, so give it for the Yankees on both sides. So for the Yankees, good start of the homestand for them against the Cubs. Good little taste of interleague action. But now we're going to get into a little Matt Carpenter talk. So if we want to roll back a few weeks when the Yankees did get Matt Carpenter, and they got him after he opted out of his Texas Rangers minor league deal. And it was at the time when the Yankees, needed some extra hands. You had Giancarlo Stanton on the IL. You had Josh Donaldson on the IL with the shoulder injury. And, of course, you had DJ, not really on the IL, but dealing with a bit of a wrist issue where they need to sit him down a little bit. So kind of like you needed someone who could maybe play a little infield, maybe possibly like a left field position if needed, or a little DH. And, of course, it always helped having a lefty bat. So mainly part of the reason they picked up Carpenter. But again, he was doing well in the minors for Texas, had 5 home runs up to that point. He kind of got dumped the year before by his former team, the Cardinals. They kind of felt he was washed up. Only was batting like 160 and had 3 home runs. So supposedly him again had a bit of a resurgence, kind of tweaked the swing, and I guess the Yankees were keeping an eye on him and decided to bring along just when they needed some extra help. But they probably had no idea he would be this good for the Yankees. Again, first 10 games, hitting 6 home runs, and the first time a Yankee player has ever done that. And for Carpenter, if you look at his season so far, overall, and this is a small sample, he's been here, hitting .333 with the 6 home runs and 13 RBIs. Now, the problem with him is that at some point, we figured that maybe with the return of Donaldson, with DJ being back in the lineup, and of course some Yankees are expecting some players to come back onto the roster, such as Jonathan Loáisiga, Aroldis Chapman. Figured Domingo Germán is going to be around the corner. Well, you're going to need roster spots, for those individual pitchers, and of course the Yankees overall like to carry a lot of pitches because they go to the bullpen a lot. Would mean like maybe a short stay for Carpenter, but how do you get rid of a guy like that if he's hitting like that? So might affect someone else the Yankees had originally for that role, which was Marwin Gonzalez, who again Cashman signed before the start of the season, kind of be of a jack of all trades. Again, he could play pretty much can play every position, maybe other than catcher. But even if you force him, I guess he could pull it off. So that's really Gonzalez's, that's really what his worth is to the team. But if you look at him overall hitting, only hitting .224 at this point, 60 games in, 0 home runs and 4 RBIs. So if you want to compare it to at least what they could produce offensively, it's not even close. Carpenter would be the way better option. Now, Gonzalez is a couple years younger, about 4 years younger. So, you can't really make the argument there. Let's say Gonzalez was like, 10 years younger and a speedster, so like Tim LaCastro, then, all right, it makes sense. But Gonzalez, is only a couple years younger than Carpenter, and Carpenter, again, seems to be the better of the 2 players right now. So if one of those players have to be bumped, you would see at this point it would maybe have to be Gonzalez. Well, again, the Yankees aren't paying much anyway, so if they were to release him or let him go or put him on waivers somehow, wouldn't be the biggest deal in the world. Now you look at other things the Yankees could do possibly. You could possibly go with one less arm than you normally would. I don't think the Yankees really want to do that because, again, they always throw a lot of arms out there again because they would go to the bullpen a lot. And, again, you kind of need that at a point, especially, we're going to start getting into the hot dog days of summer pretty darn soon. You're not going to get rid of Josh Donaldson, even though he's been a little bit of a headache with the whole, Tim Anderson situation. But he's making a lot of money. Plus, you traded assets in Gary and Gio and obtain him and others. So you're just not going to flush that down the toilet. And of course, Hicks, you're still paying him for another 3 years. You're not going to get him off the spot, even though he hasn't got off overall to a good start this season. And Joey Gallo, of course, has been hitting much better. Again, the third game in Minnesota, as well as having a couple doubles in the Chicago series at home. So it seems like he's been picking up a little bit. So really, the only odd man out we would think offensively is going to be Marwin Gonzalez. Again, if Carpenter keeps up this pace. The only benefit is maybe Gonzalez could play a little more outfield, maybe center field. And obviously, Carpenter's probably something Carpenter can't do. But again, I think the Yankees have that covered because normally you'd want Hicks out there. But, of course, as we've been seeing, Judge been getting a lot of playing time out in center as well. So I don't think they really need like a third center field. And plus, of course, there's always Tim LeCastro floating around as well, who we know could also play center field. So let's see how this goes along. If anyone gets, maybe someone else will get injured and then it'll kind of solve itself. But other than that, once some players like Chapman come back and Loizaga come back and Herman at some point, something's gonna have to give there. So either going to drop a bullpen arm or again might be the end of Marwin Gonzalez. And another Yankee player who could possibly be on the outs in the coming weeks is Higgy, as I mentioned in the Game 1 against the Cubs. Again, Boone decided to pinch hit Trevino for him, and Trevino came through. And again, just another bad look for Higgy, who has not gotten it going at all this season. I know he hit the 2 home runs in Game 3. Hurrah. Again, one of those off a first baseman throwing a 35-mile-per-hour knuckleball, which I could hit. I won't say I would hit a home run, but I could definitely hit a hit out of the outfield. So overall, that hasn't been a good situation for Higgy. Now, again, they made the trade early this season for Ben Rovette. Again, left-handed bat. Only saw a very small handful of games last year, so there's not really much to go on with him. But I guess, for some reason, Cashman seemed to be high on him to bring him over here. And again, he does provide the Yankees with yet another left-handed bat. Higgy a righty, of course. So only good news for Higgy is, again, Rovette's still several weeks away. Again, they're trying to rehab him to get back. But once he's ready for the major league level, if Higgy just doesn't pick up with the bat, maybe it's a situation where they decide to give Ben Rovette a look as the backup and let Trevino take the starting job. Could be a possibility there. Only reason may not happen is just because, again, Rovette's been hurt a while, so it's kind of like one of those things like, well, once he's on the field, I'll believe it when I see it. And also, number 2, Higgy, he knows a lot of these pitches already, so even if he's not contributing much with the bat, at least, catching and framing the pitches wise, he knows the pitches, he knows the starters, he's familiar. Again, he's been here a couple of seasons already, so, obviously Cole likes him. He's kind of Cole's guy, quote unquote. He knows Nestor, he knows Monty, he knows Severino, and again, Taillon, I guess, from last year, again, picking up from they left off from last year. So, 4 out of the 5 starters he probably knows pretty well for a couple of seasons now, especially with Monty, them just being up in the minors for a little bit. So, can Rovette possibly steal his job? Maybe, but again, I just don't see it happening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. 60 games in, the Yankees the first team with the 44 wins, best record in baseball. Let's hope they continue that and make sure you do your job. Sign up to the podcast, Section 420 Talkin Yankees. Sign up.